In this video, I want to give you a quick review of Sasquatch Kick Machine 2 from Boz Digital Labs and show you how you can take your drums from sounding like this to sounding like this. With just a few easy plugins. So get ready to rock. Hey Rockstars, if this is your first time here and you want to learn how to record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever, then remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below so you don't miss anything from us here at Recording Studio Rockstars. Okay, so here's what my raw kick drum sounds like right now in this session. Not too bad. Sounds like a standard inside mic on a kick drum. I did maybe a little bit of EQ when I recorded it, added a tiny bit of top and a tiny bit of bottom, but overall it still sounds like kind of a not so exciting kick drum. But in this case, I added a few plugins to it. The first plugin I chose to use on this is the Hoser 4-band EQ from Boz Digital Labs. This is a plugin that Boz developed with David Bendeth that models a Ward Beck console, what was considered to be the Canadian Neve console. So it's a 4-band EQ. I'm able to use this to add some top end to it, a little bit of point around the kick beater, take about 400 hertz back just a tiny bit, and then boost a little bit of the low end. And let's see what this plugin sounds like as far as adding to the sound. Here's the kick before. And then here's the kick with the EQ on. Okay, so you can hear it's adding just a little bit of punch to it, and it's clearing up the top end and giving a little bit of punch to the beater. Next plugin I chose to use is the Manic Compressor, which again is another cool plugin from Boz Digital Labs. This one gives you 6 different compressor modes. You've got some options here to thin and thicken the sound up a little bit. You have input drives, so you can push the signal a lot harder, attack, release, threshold, ratio, all standard things on compressors, and then a special loudness relief button. And then you also have a wet and a dry mix option if you want to do a parallel compression. In this case, I just added a tiny bit of gain to it, tiny bit of compression, just to kind of bring the kick drum forward. Let's hear how this thing sounds. Here is the before kick drum. And then here's with the Manic Compressor on it. I'd say this is probably only adding just a little bit of tone to it, very subtle. I might even be able to not use it in this case, but when I put it in there mixing, I just thought it sounded pretty good, so I left it in. Next is the Sasquatch Kick Machine 2. Now this is the secret weapon plugin that is going to help you transform your kick from sounding like a cardboard box kind of simple drum that you record in your home studio that you're adding some EQ to, but maybe doesn't quite sound as big as you want it to. This is going to take it to that next level. Here's what the kick sounds like with the Hoser EQ and the Manic Compressor, but not adding the Sasquatch yet. So this is still the raw kick. Now here's adding the Sasquatch Kick Machine 2. Pretty awesome. Let me give you guys a quick tour of what's inside the Sasquatch Kick Machine 2. So this thing basically takes your original dry plug-in signal, which is over here on the left, and then it adds a couple of things to your sound. Over here is the Oomph section, which is like the low-end resonance of your front head of your kick drum. This is where the body and the sustain is and the power. And then right here is the Clik section, and this is what adds the the beater attack and helps you control and dial in a little bit more of that into the sound of your drum. So let me show you, starting with just the dry signal. Again, you'll hear what that sounds like. All right, now I'll add in the oomph. And now the click. All right, now I'll solo the oomph. If I want more of the double kick, turn this threshold down. Now here's the click sound on that kick drum soloed. It's sort of a funny sound by itself, and you wouldn't expect that to have such an awesome effect on the drum, but just that little bit of distortion and attack and spit on the drum sound really helps to bring it forward. Here's our original dry drum kick right here. And you can tell we have a lot of snare bleed on this particular kick drum, so it might have helped if I even put in a gate beforehand just to control things. But in this case, I'm just going to go with the way it is and not sweat it too much. So once all three of these things add up, you've got a low frequency boost that you can add to the signal. And in this case, we're adding 20 dB 100 hertz boost to the wet signal coming from the oomph. You could add that to the dry signal if you wanted, but I got this with a cool sound that works for me for this particular drum set and this mix. And then you have a high pass filter. This thing defaults to high passing the low frequencies in your original kick. In this case, I liked having both of them pass through, no problem. Then you have a limiter section. You can limit the output of the whole kick drum, so you can put a limiter on it. You also have a drive, so you can push up the drive and punch it a little more. Again, this is applied to the wet signal right now, which is the oomph and the click, but you can apply it to the dry, and then you'd be affecting both of them at the same time. So it's pretty cool. You can really dial in some stuff. Let me just show you what I did one more time. Here's the dry signal. Then I'm adding the oomph to it. And now I'm adding the click to it. So you can hear it's really cool. It adds a lot of power. Now I'll give you a little bit more of a tour of each of these. So if you click the down arrow, then it takes you to the fine-tuned settings for each of these sections. The oomph section, click this, and it's the same color blue down here. You have some really cool options. So you have, first of all, the waveform choice that you can do. So if you click here, you get an entire sine wave. Let's see, if you put this back to where it was, that links the top and bottom of the waveform. Now you've got a sine wave that is sine wave completely. You can do a triangle wave, a square wave, and a sawtooth. And if you unlink them, you can actually have the top sine wave, but the bottom could be one of these other ones, or vice versa, like that, which is pretty cool. All right, I'm going to solo this so we can really hear what's going on with the oomph section. We'll flip through these different sounds. So here's the sine wave. And if you want to, you could really dial it in and do crazy stuff to it, like so that gives it that 808 kick, which is pretty cool, if that was the right jam for your drum sound. Here's triangle. Square wave. And sawtooth. And then if I split them, here's what it sounds like if I do the top of the sine wave and the bottom of the sawtooth. Gets a little growly in a cool way. So then these all come down and feed these other controls. So you have a sustain here, so you can increase the sustain of the kick. You have the attack for how fast it's going to show up. You have the drop, which affects the tone generator down here. So with the tone generator, this bottom one is going to determine this frequency of the low resonance that's sustaining here, and the top is the starting point of this tone generator, and the drop is how fast it goes from the high to the low right here. So if you start at 409 and go down here and drop this fast, it's going to sound like this. And if I slow down the drop, it starts to sound like a laser beam, right? You really hear that, which can be very cool if you're doing electronic music and you're trying to get that kind of old school, you know, Juno 909 kick or whatever. All right, cool. So that's what that does. The roundness is the shape of the waveform. You can really freak it out if you go extreme with it. But you can also MIDI control this. So I don't have a MIDI controller hooked up, but if you hook up your keyboard, you can play these different keys and it will control and make, if this follow button is on, then this frequency down here will follow the keys that you're on. Let's try that and you can see it move around. So you could actually find the key of your song and pick that frequency to be the resonant tone of the kick drum if you wanted to. Now let's go over to the Clik, and in the Clik section, you get some of the similar stuff. You get the filter here between 100 hertz. In this case, you know, you can move this down to wherever you want, and the high. But you don't have the drop anymore. You do have sustain up here. So let me solo this Clik so you can hear it. Not hearing a ton of lows, but if I move the highs up, we'll hear a lot more highs. Really hear it there. And if you're already thinking that sounds a little bit like a snare, it's that bright, then you're getting ahead of me, which is you can use this on the snare too, which is pretty cool. So let's move the sustain up. And then resonant would be the resonant filter at each of these frequencies. So if you really crank it, you're going to hear a lot of it. So obviously with all these, the extreme settings are places you might be less likely to use. You might go with something that just sort of blends in with your kit. All right, so now if we go here, I'll show you what these settings do on the kick drum sound. All right, so take the boost out, and you're controlling the bottom of it. Put it on the dry. Now it's bigger for sure, but it's probably more than you wanted, you know? And then high pass filter. If you want to cut out the lows on the real kick, so all you get is the low end from the Oomph instead. Now turn this off and you'll hear both the real kick and the Oomph working together. Actually, this will no longer affect anything. If you wanted to cut the Oomph out, you do that. But again, I'm not sure why exactly you would do that, since you'd be cutting out what you just put together. Let me show you the threshold and the drive too. In this case, they're both on the dry or on the wet. Now that's, you can hear it's kind of killing the Oomph because I've got the threshold. It's limiting it so low. Now if I turn the drive up, it's going to drive the Oomph. So I got to be careful of your speakers there. Then I'll put it on the dry and see what it does. There you can hear that I just kind of turned the threshold down on the dry, so it's actually limiting the dry, and all you hear is the Oomph and the Clik. But that could help you control a sloppy kick drum, the real kick drum that was recorded. And you could drive the real kick drum some more. But you can hear it's bringing up the snare now that's bleeding, right? So pretty cool. Then on the snare drum, I use the same plugins, and let me show you the difference there. Raw snare. Adding the hoser. Adding the manic compressor. And and then adding the Sasquatch Kick Machine 2 to the snare drum. And I'll solo some of these for you so you can hear what it's doing. Hear that little bit of thump? You can actually use this plugin on a snare drum or a tom to kind of tweak the sound a little bit. Here's the original snare. And then here is adding just the oomph to it. Again, original snare. And then adding the oomph. Now I'm going to add the click. Okay, so here's the overhead, and on the overhead I used the Boz Digital Labs Manic compressor to just try and control the sound just a little bit. Here is with the compressor off. This is just the raw overhead sound. And here's with the compressor on. So hopefully you can hear that. It just adds a little bit of excitement. I wasn't trying to do anything drastic here. I just wanted to add a little bit of energy. All right, so here is the room mics. Again, another place I put the Boz Digital Labs Manic compressor on. This time I used the shear mode with some different settings. Here's what it sounds like, the raw room mics. And here's with the compressor on. Hopefully you can hear that that adds a little bit of snap to the snare drum and just sounds kind of cool. And again, these settings are ones that I made when I was listening to the whole drum kit all together. So you might be inclined to try something different if you're soloed, but when you go mix it with the rest of the drum kit, you could end up at a different place. So that's what I'm showing you. I'm showing you the kind of mix decisions I made when I was messing around with the whole mix. All right, next up is the drum bus. Now, Manic Compressor does a cool thing. It allows you to use parallel compression on faders inside the plugin. So here is bypass, and this is just the drum bus coming through this drum bus, all the drums coming through the drum bus with no additional compression on them. Now if I add the compressor, muted, bypass, and here comes the compressor. You hear all that excitement and the kick drum and stuff that comes in. So that is what's going on here with the wet channel. If I mute the dry channel, you hear just the compression of the wet channel. And then if I unmute the dry channel again, you'll hear the raw drums. And when I add the wet channel, it's going to add a little bit more excitement underneath. Hear that? All right, so there you go. There you have it. That is what I was messing with. Oh, last thing. Sorry, the bass right here. Again, I added a few things. I added the Hoser XT EQ. I used the big clipper to give it a little bit more of a controlled amp tone, and then I used the compressor. So here's the original bass. And then here is with all the plugins on. Hopefully that sounds like a more of a warm tone to you. Again, original bass. Sort of a little bit wimpy and thin sounding and mid-rangey. Now if I add the plugins, it thickens it out, makes it sound like he's got big fat bass fingers, which is groovy. All right, cool. So thanks so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, the Sasquatch Kick Machine 2 is the plugin of the day. This thing really will make your kick drum sound like you started in a home studio but ended up with a pro mix if you use it right and dial it in. It's got a bunch of presets in here which are all awesome and very helpful. I ended up dialing in mine because every drum set is different, and you're going to want to mess around with some of these settings until you find something that just adds the right amount of low end and the right amount of sustain to your kick, and then adds the beater frequency just right so that you get just a little bit more attack. And then again, your drums will go from sounding like this to sounding like this. All right, thanks so much for watching this. If you want to learn more about Boz Digital Labs, then go to the link below at bozdigitallabs.com, and make sure to check out the Sasquatch Kick Machine 2 plugin, which has just come out. It's awesome. You're totally going to dig it, and we'll see you guys around the studio. Thanks for watching. Cheers.